Alright, so let's take a look here at the front main body and all of these little pocket layers. Now, if you recall on the pattern making, on the main body, we put red along this right here for the opening of the hip pocket. And if you take out your top bag pattern piece, you'll also see we put red on there. So those are going to sew together. Now the other two pattern pieces is the under bag and the facing. And you'll notice we put blue in the corner up here for both of them, and they're going to sew together as well. So let's go ahead and arrange our pattern pieces like this. So do this with me now. Take out your two front pieces and let's get them so they're right sides up. And we can lay them out here where the side seams are next to each other. Now taking a look at your pocket bags, here's where we have the top bag liner, and this needs to sew so it's on the inside of your pants, but it also needs to sew right sides together with your pants. So for instance, this piece that I'm holding would go over here. And this piece will come over here. So just double check it with me now. This is the top bag liner. This is the right side up with the happy face. This is my pants right side up, and I'm putting them right sides together. Now what we're going to do with the top pocket is we're going to sew the little tiny 1/4 inch along the top pocket opening. If you need a reminder of how big that 1/4 inch is, you could come in here and you could draw and chalk that 1/4 inch to make sure you're really accurate. Okay, so I've pinned my top pocket bag on top of the main body. I matched up the opening, the notch, the grain lines, the top edge. And then I also took the time to just lightly draw in that 1/4 inch seam allowance to make sure that I'm sewing it perfectly. Then you can sew your pocket from end to end, just here at the top opening. No back tack at the beginning and no back tack at the end. Now that you've sewn your pocket, we need to come in here and clip all along the curve. Just do single clips on the inside curve. And to make sure you've done this correctly, just see if you can pull your thread totally straight, and then you know that you've clipped it correctly. The next thing we want to do is we want to finger press the seam. Make sure you're finger pressing all the way down to every single stitch. Then we can bring the top bag here to the inside of your pants. And we want to continue getting this edge perfectly flat and pressed right along every single stitch. Now if you've sewn it correctly, you should be able to bring it all to the inside, and then you can still match up the notches right here, the top edge out here, and the grain lines are still stacked right on top of each other. Then we can steam and press this nice and flat like I've already done here, and then I'm ready to come in here and do a single top stitch. So you can see here I did a single top stitch for the opening of my pocket. Obviously you could do whatever you want. You could do an edge stitch or a top stitch. And if you take a look at your store-bought pants, you might notice they have like a double top stitch. So go ahead and do a top stitch or an edge stitch, beginning and ending with no bar tack. If everything looks good, you can trim your threads down to 1/2 inch. And also, I'm going to leave my pins in here just to hold this flap in place. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my pins in between the 2 layers so the tip of the pin doesn't poke me. Now that we have the front main body plus the top bag finished, let's go ahead and set all this off to the side. And let's talk about what to do now with these 2 pieces. So what we have now is going to be the underbag and the front pocket facing. When we take a look at our jeans, this is the front pocket facing. This one has a little coin pocket on it. This one's just blank. And remember that facing, it goes to the inside of your pocket and it's got this overlock stitch, and then it just gets sewn directly down onto the underbag. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and overlock these edges. If you don't have an overlock machine, you could just simply put a stay stitch in here so it doesn't fall apart. Alright, so once you've finished the raw edge of your facing piece, then let's go ahead and line it up with the underbag at this upper top corner. Remember, this is the same as the blue on your pattern pieces. Then you can go in and throw a stay stitch all along the bottom edge so the facing piece doesn't come up. No back tack at the beginning or the end. And then also put a stay stitch here along the top edge so the 2 layers stay together nice. If everything looks good, you can clip all of your extra threads down to 1/2 inch. Okay, now take out your 2 underbags that we just sewed with the pocket facing on there. And also take out your top bag pattern piece and your underbag pattern piece. Now if you recall, the top bag pattern piece, we have a definite blue line on here for what's the bottom of the bag. And we determined this for how deep you want your hand to go inside of the pocket. And also we're keeping it short so it doesn't get close to your thigh. Now on the underbag pattern piece, we left this light in pencil. And I've told you a few times that this is going to change. Now what we need to do is, we can't do the change until we do a fitting back to the dress form. And then we're going to know what to do with this. But the top bag, this one we're pretty definite about. What I want to do is, I want to put a stay stitch on my top bag pieces. So let's bring our fronts over. And if we come in here and we look at the top bag, remember we have this 1-inch seam allowance, and then this was the blue line for what we think is the bottom of the bag. I want to throw a stay stitch on just the liner piece. So watch me first. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to take these pins out. I'll turn this over to where it's right side up, and I can come in here and I can chalk my 1-inch seam allowance. And I'm going to throw a stay stitch on there just through the single pocket layer. So here you can see I put my stay stitch in there, but it does not go through to the front of the pants. And let's go ahead and do that for both sides. Okay, so take out your right pant leg, just like I have now, and this is the correct side up. And then take out your pocket bag liner that would match with this, and it would normally sew underneath here. So now you can see this would be the opening for my pocket, and this would be the 2 bag liners. Now normally if we were sewing this in final fabric, or if our patterns were perfect, what we would do is instead of sewing this stay stitch only to the front layer, normally what we would be doing is we would be sewing the two pocket bags together right now and finishing the bottom edge of our bag. The reason that we're not sewing these together right now is because we still want to do a fitting, and we need to determine if we're going to move this pocket opening a little bit back and forth to get a little more of a custom fit on our jeans. Now, as soon as we move this pocket back and forth, we're changing the location of the pocket bag up here at the top. That's why we cannot finish sewing the pocket correctly just yet. Now, with that said, here's what we're going to do. We need to have all of the side seam connected together, and we can leave this part here loose. So what we're going to do is the bottom edges of both the top pocket and the under pocket, we're going to sew it for 1 inch starting from the side seam coming into the pocket, and we'll do a back tack right there. And then we'll leave the rest of this open. So I want to make sure here that the top of the pocket, there's the 2 notches. They should line up with the facing. And the side seam raw edges should all line up, as well as down here at the bottom of the pockets. Now, if something's not lining up, if it's fighting with each other, then what I would do is I would make sure that everything is matching here at the notch. I would make all of these pocket bags lay flat. And then if one pocket bag is slightly different from the other, I don't care. The most important thing is that these notches line up with the facing underneath, and also the raw edges of the side seam all line up. Now, if everything's good to go, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew these 2 pocket bags together from the side seam for 1 inch. So starting from the side seam, I sewed with no back tack. Once I got out to this location, I put a back tack in there, and now I can cut my thread short. And I know that doing this with the pocket bag liner, it sounds a little bit strange, a little bit wonky, but there's no avoiding this. If you want to do the best fitting jeans on your client or your dress form or back to yourself, you really want to be able to have the freedom to move this location of the pocket opening, because this is acting like a dart on the front of your pants, and that's a huge part of what makes this custom fit to your body. So I know that this is a little bit strange, but once you've gone through the process once, you'll totally understand why we're doing this. Alright, so let's go ahead and do this to the other side of your pants. So again, I'm lining up all of the notches. I'm pinning that in place. And then I'm just shifting the layers a little bit to make sure all the side seam raw edges are lined up together. Then if I want to, I can pin through all layers up here one more time. Now what we're working on is you're going to open this up, and for the first inch we're going to sew the 2 pocket bottoms together. No back tack at the beginning, do a back tack here in the middle, and cut all your thread short. Alright, so now that we have the bottoms of our pockets sewn together for 1 inch, go ahead and stay stitch all layers here at the side seam, making sure that your notch is matching through all layers and the raw edges are all together. Now, once you've stay stitched through all layers of the side seams, you're going to notice that the top edges here don't line up when everything's laying flat, and that is correct. Go ahead and stay stitch center front, starting from the zip stop all the way to the top of center front. Now that you've put a stay stitch on the center front, as well as stay stitch the side seam of both layers of your pants, and if it helps, what you can do is you can pin all the layers of the pocket so they're not flapping around for both sides. And then we're going to put the two fronts together. And what we need to do is we need to sew the crotch seam starting from the zip stop with the back tack. And then we're going to sew all the way here to the inseam with the back tack. And for me, before I come in and sew just this small area, I want to make sure that my pattern pieces are lined up at the notches at the knee. I can see the grain lines are on top of each other all the way down here to the ankles. The ankles are level. Everything is totally perfect in its place. The side seams are matching up here. And now I'll come in and I'll start pinning this in place to get ready for sewing. And for me, I'll even come out here in the middle and just throw a pin in there so none of these layers shift when I'm sewing. So now I've sewn the crotch seam at 1/2 inch. I back tack at the beginning and the end. If everything looks good, go ahead and cut your threads down to 1/2 inch. Alright, so when you're wearing jeans, it doesn't matter if it's men's or women's, it's going to close to the wearer's right side. So we need all of the seam allowances here to press towards the wearer's left side. So find her left leg, and over here at center front, you're going to finger press this right along that stay stitch at center front. And then you'll continue pressing the crotch seam towards the wearer's left leg. Now if we take a look here at the store-bought pants, we can see that the front crotch seam has this double top stitch. It looks like they did a flat fell seam, but if you go to the inside, you can see that all they did was overlock the edges and then do a double top stitch from the front. The reason you can't do a flat fell here is because you're doing all of the zipper construction as well. Now for us, what we're going to do is we're just making sure that we're pressing all of the seam allowances towards the wearer's left side. Later on, if you wanted to, for yourself, you could overlock these edges and you could throw a single or a double top stitch in the crotch seam. That's something that I would do during final fabric. For now, we don't even have to worry about it. Alright, so what we're ready to do is we're ready to start putting our inseams together. Okay, so take out your front pieces and your backs. And what we're going to do is we're going to now sew these together at the inseams. And we're going to put them together right sides up. So let's take our fronts here and we're going to open this up to where we can see the inseam all the way across. You also want to just double check to make sure that the seam allowance here is going towards the wearer's left side of the body. For me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin these seam allowances in place so they don't shift around. Alright, so we have our fronts with the right sides up. We want to come over here and we're going to get our backs. And again, this is going to be the inseam. So this is where the crotch seam is already sewn together. And we're going to have the backs facing right sides together with the fronts. And also the seam allowance here is pressed towards the wearer's left leg. What I want to do is I want to come in here and I want to perfectly match those two inseams. So here we're looking at the crotch seam from the front, and if I measure down 1/2 inch and make a cross mark, I know that that's where the seams are going to cross each other. And then over here I have the crotch seam from the back, and I want to do the same thing. I want to measure down 1/2 inch and make a cross mark. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm bringing a pin here along the front at the crotch seam, at the seam allowance, and I'm going to match it up here with the backs. And now I know as I move around and I get this pin to poke perfectly straight up and down, I'll know that those two seams are right on top of each other. Then I can come in here and I can pin this seam in place so it doesn't move. And I could take that pin out and then I'll pin it going crosswise as well. So this is totally locked in place, and as I sew over it, they're going to be right on top of each other. Now at this point I'm ready to go ahead and come all the way down to the ankles and start sewing my inseams. So now I've sewn it from the ankle with the back tack all the way along, making sure I'm getting my double notches and my knee levels are lined up. Coming here into the crotch area, making sure that the crotch is still perfectly lined up, and then continuing on to the double notches and the knee level here on the other side, and then all the way down here to the ankle, and I did a back tack. I also did a little bit of a back tack right here at that crotch seam. If you take a look at your store-bought pants, you'll see that all of the seam allowances here for the inseam are pressed towards the front leg, and they've also gone in and thrown a single top stitch. As well, they've overlocked it so it doesn't fall apart when it goes through the washing machine. Now for us, we don't need to do all this construction because we're just doing a mock-up test fit. But we do want to make sure that the seam allowances are pressed towards the front. So I've taken the time to go in and finger press all of my inseams towards the front, and then I steamed and pressed them as well. This is your last chance now to come in and steam and press all of your pant legs and get rid of all of these wrinkles before we do our last sewing, which is going to be the side seams.